launching a new round of airstrikes in Lebanon today, taking out more Hezbollah commanders after the stunning assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah on Friday. Nabil Koch, a member of Hezbollah's Central Council and a key military leader for the terror group, killed. Iran responding to the recent string of attacks on one of its key proxies, saying the deaths of Nasrallah and other Hezbollah leaders will not go unavenged. This rhetoric amping up fears of a ground invasion of Lebanon and a greater war in the region. The U.S. State Department urging Americans to leave Lebanon due to the unpredictable nature of ongoing conflict. Joining us live today from Jerusalem is the news director for the Associated Press in Israel, Joseph Fetterman. Thank you so much for coming on. Hezbollah confirming this morning that one of the top commanders was killed. What are you hearing about his death?
This is just the latest in a string of hits on Hezbollah. You mentioned the big one, Nasrallah, but over the past few weeks, Israel has taken out a string of leadership, and it makes you wonder, where do things go from here? Hezbollah not only losing its top leader, but pretty much anyone who might have been in the running to replace him. So there is a sense of disarray within Hezbollah, and there is a sense among Israeli military leaders that they really have the group on the ropes right now. The question is, what is the next step? You mentioned the possibility of a ground invasion. That's something that, that's in the works, or something that they're considering, and it's really not quite clear yet which way things are going to go.
Joseph, what more are you hearing about this ground invasion of Lebanon, if it were to happen? What's the mood regarding such an operation?
Well, the mood in Lebanon, clearly there's a sense of dread. You have seen tens, hundreds of thousands of people fleeing southern Lebanon over the past week or so, fearing this invasion. Israel has moved troops over the past week or two. Thousands of troops are now massed along the border. More have been heading up in recent days. Israeli military commanders say they are waiting for the command. So no decision yet, but this would be a big step and another escalation after several weeks of heavy fighting.
Joseph, have you spoken to any local residents about what the feeling is there?
Well, there's a mixed sense here in Israel. On one hand, there's a sense of relief and almost a feeling among some people, not quite happiness, but I think relief is probably the best word after taking out Nasrallah over the weekend. This is really a high-level symbolic victory. He's led Hezbollah for 3 decades, probably, public enemy #1 on a lot of people's lists. So there is a sense of relief. But on the other hand, the thought of continued fighting, the rocket fire is still continuing from Hezbollah. You don't know how else that group is going to respond. And the thought of a ground invasion. Right now, Israel does seem to have that upper hand on the battlefield, but these things can change. And once you send ground troops in, you're talking about a high likelihood of casualties, and you just never know. We've seen it not only with Israel, but with the American military as well. You send troops in at the beginning, you never know how these operations are going to end.
It's a really good point. Joseph Fetterman of the Associated Press, live from Jerusalem. Please stay safe, and thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. And now, to talk more about this, is the Vice President for Policy at the Jewish Institute for National Security of America, Blaise Misztal. Blaise, thanks so much for coming on. I want to focus on what we just talked about with Joseph. So Israeli officials, they haven't ruled out the possibility of a ground invasion in Lebanon. The thing is, though, given how successful they have been with their recent attacks on the organization, I don't know if it would be necessary. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. And I think that is the right question to ask. What happens now? And to answer that, I think it's important to understand what Israel's goals are when it comes to Hezbollah. And there's really 2 main ones. The first is to stop the threat to Israel that has displaced some 80,000 Israelis from their homes close to the Lebanese border. And to do that, Israel wants to push Hezbollah 6 miles, 8 miles back from the Lebanese border to have this sort of secure area so they know that those homes, those houses, those schools aren't going to be fired upon. The second goal is to eliminate Hezbollah's large stockpile of rockets, between 150 to 200,000 by some counts, that could be used, launched and used to decimate the entirety of Israel. And so I think they've actually made a lot of progress on that second goal. They've not just killed Hezbollah commanders, but Israeli military sources have told me they think they've destroyed about 60% of the longest range weapons that Hezbollah has, but they haven't accomplished that first goal. Hezbollah is still on the border. They're still able to fire rockets that make parts of Israel uninhabitable. And that's what has to be solved by Israel now. That could be solved through international pressure on Hezbollah, on Lebanon, to back off, to end this war. But if not, it is going to require an Israeli ground operation to force Hezbollah back from the border.
You touched upon a little bit, and by the way, this is a live look at Tel Aviv right there. How does this affect ceasefire talks? And by the way, I should tell you, from the United States perspective, they weren't incorporated into this conversation about Israel's attacks on Hezbollah. So when you think about the overall arch of how this could affect a ceasefire, what's your take?
Yeah, well, so the United States has been pushing to solve the tension, the low-level conflict between Hezbollah and Israel with a ceasefire deal, and one in which Hezbollah was either not being cooperative or making demands of Israel to give up some of its territory close to the border, claiming that they wanted to move the border. And so it was really going to be a ceasefire on Hezbollah's terms, and a ceasefire that was not going to be enforceable, because who was going to make sure that Hezbollah actually left the border areas, that it actually stopped firing, that it was going to be held accountable if it restarted firing on Israel. And so that was unacceptable to Israel, understandably. Now they are in a much stronger position to demand a ceasefire from Hezbollah. And I think this is an opportunity for the United States to work together with Israel to put pressure on Iran, on Hezbollah, to say, look, you started this war. This is what happens when you mess with Israel. Back down now, or it's only going to get worse. That path leads to peace. I'm afraid that the path that the U.S. has followed thus far of talking about de-escalation and wanting to avoid conflict hasn't worked.
Well, let's talk about that with escalation. I mean, you mentioned what these effects could have on Hezbollah and its ability to conduct further operations. But we have to remember that when it comes to Iran, right, they are kind of stepped out of this. They say this is going to be up to Hezbollah to retaliate. So this idea that Iran is not going to take a part in this, is not going to actually retaliate against Israel, do you believe that, and why is that the case?
Yeah, I think it's very likely that Iran wants no part in retaliating against Israel for two reasons. The first one is that Iran's whole strategy is to fight to the last Arab, not the last Iranian. They've created these proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, so that they have these useful Arab militias that fight for it rather than it having to do the dirty work itself. Right. This whole situation has flipped Iran's strategy on its head. Hezbollah exists to protect Iran, but now Iran is being asked to protect Hezbollah. It's not going to want to do that. But secondly, Iran has already tried to attack Israel during this war. If we think back to April, Iran launched over 300 missiles and drones at Israel. 3 of them made it through the defenses that the United States, Israel, and other international partners put up to shoot down those projectiles. So Iran has found out that it can't actually hit Israel very well. It can try to use its proxies, but its own capabilities are actually pretty limited. And so for those reasons, I don't think it wants to get involved. It would rather have Hezbollah, or as we've seen in the past couple of days, the Houthis from Yemen be the ones who are striking Israel. And
it will become a question to see if Israel attacks the Houthis preemptively, similar to Hezbollah. I wanted to ask you about the human element. So the fighting in Lebanon has displaced over 60,000 Israelis in northern Israel. With Hezbollah so heavily degraded, you wonder when those Israelis could come back. And on the other side of the coin, Lebanon facing its own humanitarian crisis. The Lebanese prime minister saying that over 1 million people could be displaced by the conflict. So I wanted to ask you what the fallout is for both of these groups of people and when they might be able to return home.
Yeah, this war that Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah started almost a year ago is having a tragic cost for Israelis, for Palestinians, now for the Lebanese. But I keep seeing these headlines, obituaries of Nasrallah that describe him as a leader of the Lebanese people, or an actor within a civic organization, defender of Lebanon. But it strikes me that if Hezbollah was really interested in the well-being and safety of the Lebanese people, now would be a time to end this conflict before there's any more suffering and any more war. So I think the ball is really in Hezbollah's court as to whether there is going to be further conflict. I think Israel has made clear its capabilities and determination to make sure that Hezbollah doesn't threaten it again. And I think here again, U.S. pressure on.
I think we lost you there, Blaise, but I hear you. And listen, at the end of the day, this is a major turning point in the crisis that is happening there, and we will see what the next steps will be for Israel, Iran, and Lebanon. And of course, we talked about the Houthis. So Blaise Misztal